Many of you are familiar with HyperFlex, would know some of this history, right? If you look at the focus of this product, it's in the sort of first and second generation. This was really about taking a modern scale-out log structure file systems, or we sometimes call that the HyperFlex data platform, and really package that into an appliance form factor with built-in east-west networking in the form of the UCS fabric interconnects, right? Productizing this on UCS, 1RU, 2RU servers, both in terms of hybrid and all flash. And really the focus in that time frame was, how do we simplify the infrastructure for running what is traditional virtualized workloads, right? Kind of replacing the traditional three-tier architecture. That was the focus in the first and second generation, very, very much in the core of the data center. And then we fast forward a little bit in sort of the third generation HyperFlex timeframe, and the key trends we see is as customers start to kind of dabble and experiment, and in some cases put into production new application architectures, namely containers, right? And we also have customers who are really starting to build out that hybrid cloud strategy. So they needed a few more things. They wanted the ability to compose a recipe for their workload to automate it. So we did an integration with Cloud Center. They wanted the ability to have visibility and optimization of that workload and deploy that workload across the on-premise private cloud in the form of HyperFlex as well as in public cloud. So we did an integration with the Cisco Workload Optimization Manager, or C1. And then further, customer want a choice in the hypervisor. So in that third generation timeframe, we introduced, kind of the first foray into multi-hypervisor, introducing Hyper-V and alongside with the SXI. And then finally, that was the first, our first generation when we supported containers on HyperFlex, where for customers who want to deploy a Kubernetes Kubernetes platform, be it vanilla Kubernetes or OpenShift or Google Anthos, they can have those containerized application consume the HyperFlex data platform as persistent storage volumes. So fast forward to the fourth generation of HyperFlex, which is basically roughly what we went into market last year. And that trend that we were catching in the market, reacting to in the market, is really this push from the core to the edge, right? Where we're seeing workloads are getting more decentralized. And indeed, if we see a lot of our customers, building, not only are they building new applications, and those new applications are being cloud native, so come back to that point later, but also the operationalization of those workloads are more and more being driven out to the edge. And so in that 4.0 timeframe, the focus very much was not only in terms of productizing a two-node edge cluster, but also how to use a Intersight SaaS model to really drive the build out of these clusters from day zero installation management to do full stack upgrades, all of that being driven from this SaaS platform, and fundamentally simplifies also the way that these edge clusters are architected with something we pioneered called the invisible cloud witness. So
Ronnie, I have a couple of questions on this slide. From the point of view of the cloud, when you talk about core cloud edge, actually cloud and edge are really complicated for HCI infrastructure usually, because on the cloud, the idea is to replicate the same kind of services you have on premises. And I'm quite curious to know on how you did that. I mean, and regarding the edge, I'm curious to understand better what kind of edge, because everybody talks about edge, but actually we have solution in the HCI world that start at 3,000 euros per node, and others that start at 50,000 euros per node, and they both call it edge, which is a totally different type of edge from my point of view. I mean, branch office of a large organization or a gas station, for example. They are both edge, but actually totally different use cases. So can you give me
great questions. Let me tackle the first one first. In that 3.0 timeframe, I would characterize what we did there in terms of cloud was how to enable kind of two sides of the coin. One side was how to enable customers to deploy some of the cloud native technologies, and namely in that case was containers and Kubernetes on an HCI environment. And then the second half of the coin was how do we enable customers to use, provide some tooling, right? Namely with things like CWarm to gain visibility and optimize where they want to place that workload, be it on premise in the HCI or in the public cloud in an IaaS environment. So that's a little different, and to what you described as, okay, how do we bring capabilities of the cloud, not deploy Kubernetes, but how do we bring additional capabilities, things like like function as a service or whatnot, into an on-prem environment. And that's actually something that we're going to talk about in the next chapter. Not this particular focus of this presentation is more on the HCI side, but to fully answer that question, it's a portfolio picture that we'll be painting. So I'll talk a little bit more about that in the next slide. Now, your comment on edge is very apt also. There is a spectrum of edge. And in the 4.0 timeframe and the work we've done so far, the focus has been on remote office, branch office. The way we think about it in terms of use cases is these are environments where the customer is wanting to run maybe more traditional virtualized application. Maybe they have a point of sale application if you're talking about retail, or they have specially built applications, virtualized application they want to run, or or containerized application that they want to run out of those places. But we are still talking more or less, beefy x86 compute workloads that do generate data that needs persistence. And then if you walk sort of to the left side of it, you can get down to, what I would call device edge, right? And that end of the spectrum is not something that HyperFlex currently plays in. And then in the middle of that spectrum, we can think about, okay, what about places where I do want beefy compute and storage? I have use cases for that, but I can't fit a traditional x86 server, right? And we address that to some degree in our 4.5 content, and I'll talk about that in a bit. And we also have something in our roadmap to address some of these more specialized use cases like ruggedized edge environments, for example. So roadmap stuff I can't disclose in this forum, but feel free to hit me up offline.
So one of the questions I have, you've got real-time analytics and inferencing as part of the solution here in the 4.0 timeframe. Are you shipping HyperFlex with GPUs or FPGAs or TPUs, that sort of thing? Or
we are absolutely shipping HyperFlex with GPUs, and there are in fact a few different options. So in the edge, right, our HX Edge platform today, that HX220, you do have the ability to embed GPUs in there for edge inferencing. We also have something called a 480 ML, you can call it a AI ML compute node that you can deploy in a standard cluster in the core. So we have had this feature in our product line for a while called compute nodes, right? Basically, workloads run there. It gets equal access to the data platform, but storage is not persist, like data doesn't persist there. So there is a C480 ML node with I think 8 GPU, like very dense from a GPU count perspective, that you can also deploy as part of our cluster as a compute node. If you want to do more serious, training of the data in the data center.